For the past 30 years, a high-stakes war has been playing out in the shadows of the European economy. It's a relentless battle between international crime syndicates and the regulators trying to stop them. A constant cat and mouse game over trillions of euros in illegal cash. So that brings us to the core problem.
It's really the number one question for any major criminal operation. How do you take all that money from, say, drug trafficking or massive fraud and make it look, well, legitimate? How do you wash it so you can actually go out and spend it without raising alarms? Well, that process has a name.
You got it, money laundering. It's kind of like financial alchemy, turning dirty money into clean, spendable cash. And for 3 decades, the European Union has been in a constant struggle, building an arsenal of rules to try and shut it down. This is the story of that fight. Okay, let's rewind the clock all the way back to the beginning. We're in the early 1990s. The global war on drugs is ramping up, and the EU is under pressure to act. So they draft their first battle plan. This was their opening shot. The first ever anti-money laundering directive back in 1991 was actually pretty straightforward. It stood on 4 basic pillars. First, just make money laundering a crime everywhere in the EU. Simple enough. Second, force banks to actually know your customer, like a bouncer checking IDs at a club. Third, make those bankers report anything that looks fishy. And finally, number 4, make them keep the records for 5 years so investigators can follow the trail.
But here's the thing. There was a massive, gaping loophole. These rules were a decent start, but criminals are, well, creative. They looked at the new laws and pretty much said, okay, so the guards are only at the banks. Fine, we'll just use other doors. So they started funneling cash through lawyers, accountants, real estate deals, you name it. The EU had to respond.
And that brings us to the 2000s. The world had changed. We had new threats like global terrorism after 9/11 and way more sophisticated corporate fraud. That simple set of rules from the 90s just wasn't going to cut it anymore. It was time to widen the net.
And boy, did they widen it. The jump was immediate and huge. The EU went from holding only the banks accountable to basically deputizing a whole army of other professionals. We're talking lawyers, accountants, real estate agents, notaries, even casinos and money transfer services. They were all now on the front lines of this fight, because that's exactly where the criminals were hiding. The third directive also rolled out a much smarter strategy. It's called the risk-based approach. And the best way to think about it is like airport security. You don't give every single passenger the same level of scrutiny, right? You focus your energy. A local student opening their first savings account? Low risk, easy peasy. A politician from a country known for high levels of corruption? Okay, they're going to get some extra screening, what's called enhanced due diligence.
So what really forced this big change? Well, it was a direct reaction to how the criminals were evolving. The fight wasn't just about drug money anymore, it was about terrorist financing. The use of lawyers and anonymous shell companies was getting out of control, and authorities were waking up to the fact that casinos were basically giant cash-washing machines. Every new rule was a direct countermove in this game.
All right, let's jump forward into the modern era. This is where the fight went digital. As our world got more and more interconnected, the new weapons in this war became transparency and technology.
One of the oldest tricks in the book has always been the anonymous shell company. A business exists on paper, but who really owns it? Who's pulling the strings? The fourth directive took aim at this problem head-on. The idea was, if a company is a puppet, the law needs to reveal the puppet master, the ultimate beneficial owner, or UBO. This forced EU countries to create central registers to unmask the real people hiding behind the corporate curtain. The directive also put the squeeze on physical cash. The threshold for reporting big cash payments was dropped from 15,000 euros down to 10,000. Now, that might not sound like a revolutionary change, but it makes moving large wads of anonymous cash just that little bit more difficult. It pushes criminals back into the formal financial system, right where they can be tracked. But just as regulators were starting to get a handle on shell companies and cash, this revolutionary new technology burst onto the scene. It promised total anonymity and decentralization. A perfect storm for money launderers. The EU had to respond, and fast. The fifth directive was that rapid response.
It dragged the wild west of crypto into the regulatory world. Suddenly, crypto exchanges had to do those know your customer checks. Authorities got new powers to identify who owned crypto wallets. And, crucially, it also made those company owner registers fully public and tightened the screws on anonymous prepaid cards. Then came the sixth directive, which really added some teeth. Before this, the minimum prison sentence for a serious money laundering conviction was just 1 year. This new rule quadrupled it to 4 years. All of a sudden, for the criminals, the risk part of that whole risk-reward calculation got a whole lot scarier. And it wasn't just about tougher sentences. The law got broader too. It created a standard, EU-wide list of 22 predicate offenses. That's just a fancy term for the original crimes that generated the dirty money. And for the first time, this list explicitly included things like cybercrime and environmental crime. So now, if you make millions illegally dumping toxic waste, washing that cash is a serious, harmonized offense across the entire EU. So for 30 years, the EU made the rules. But here's the catch. Enforcement was left up to each of the 27 member states. And that created gaps and inconsistencies that clever criminals could and did exploit. But in 2024, that all changed. We're seeing the single biggest step forward in this entire story. Everyone meet AMLA, the new EU anti-money laundering authority. It's based in Frankfurt, and it's basically the new sheriff in town. Its job is pretty clear, and it's got 3 main parts. First, it will directly supervise about 40 of the absolute riskiest financial firms in Europe. Second, it's going to write a single rulebook so those loopholes between countries just disappear. And third, it'll act as a central hub, coordinating all the national financial crime units so they can finally connect the dots on these massive cross-border schemes. And listen, this isn't some far-off plan for the distant future. It is happening right now. AMLA is set to be up and running by mid-2025. It'll start directly supervising the biggest players by early 2028. This is a fundamental shift away from a patchwork of national rules to one single, coordinated European defense system. And this quote from Germany's finance minister really gets to the heart of why this all matters. This isn't just about abstract rules for banks. Because when criminal clans and the mafia can wash billions of euros with ease, it's the honest citizens and everyday businesses who get hurt. It funds more crime, it warps the economy, and it just corrodes trust in the entire system. So after a 30-year arms race, we've arrived here, a central EU watchdog and a single rulebook. But that old cat-and-mouse game, it is far from over. Criminals are already using AI to cook up even more sophisticated schemes. And you bet regulators are planning to use AI to spot them. Which leaves us with one final massive question. In this new digital battlefield, who's going to win the next round?